In an increasingly complex and challenging world, can a single nation truly ensure global security on its own? The NATO Alliance, led by the United States, stands as a formidable defense wall against ever-growing threats. Yet behind this collaboration lies a lesser-known story of strategy, power, and even underlying tensions. What is the true role of the United States within NATO? And does NATO have the strength to uphold order in this turbulent world? Let's dive deeper into NATO and explore how the United States is shaping the future of global security. When NATO was founded, it made a powerful declaration: one for all for one. It sounds like an idealistic vision, a commitment to mutual defense among member nations. But in reality, NATO is not merely a defensive organization. It represents a much larger mission, the mission of ensuring the common interests of its member countries, particularly those of the United States. Through NATO, the U.S. can maintain its influence on the global stage, building an extensive network of allied nations. So the question arises, is NATO simply a security shield? Or is it also a tool for powerful nations to display their influence and assert their standing in the global order? But NATO doesn't stop at being a military alliance. It is a powerful pledge among member states. Imagine this: if one member country is attacked, all other countries treat it as an attack on themselves. This principle is foundational, creating an invisible shield that protects NATO countries, especially during the tense atmosphere of the Cold War. With this commitment, NATO stands as a symbol of unity and mutual support among allied nations. But why is the role of the United States in NATO so special? Imagine NATO as a sports team, with the United States as the captain. This captain doesn't just contribute in strategy, but also provides the majority of the funding, weaponry, and technology. In fact, the U.S. is the largest contributor to NATO's budget, covering nearly 70% of the alliance's total budget. This means NATO relies heavily on the U.S., from military strength to crisis response capabilities. America's role is both protective and controlling, a contradiction that makes its position in NATO a hot topic, both supported and questioned. Is America's leadership truly necessary? Can NATO function without the U.S.? Or is this dependence actually creating a vulnerability? Because if the U.S. decides to shift its strategy or withdraw from NATO, the alliance would face a major crisis. And this is one of NATO's biggest challenges. How can it maintain unity without relying too heavily on a single nation? The world has changed. War today is no longer the same as before, and the challenges NATO faces are also no longer the same. In the past, NATO primarily prepared for traditional military conflicts, but now threats have expanded across more complex fronts. NATO must confront modern challenges like cyber attacks, terrorism, and information warfare, where strength lies not only in weapons but also in the ability to control and manage information. In an increasingly digital world, NATO must adapt and innovate to maintain its strength. The member nations have differing interests and visions. This means that when facing a common threat, finding a unified voice within NATO becomes more challenging. So, what will NATO do to preserve unity and continue safeguarding the security of its members? So what exactly is America's role in international crises? Looking back at recent major conflicts, from tensions in Ukraine, instability in the Middle East, to competition with Russia and China, we see that the U.S. frequently takes the lead in NATO's military decisions. The U.S. acts as a pioneer, crafting quick response strategies to address emerging threats. Some countries support this assertive approach by the U.S., while others worry about long-term consequences and the impact on their own national security. However, this leadership role isn't always met with full support from allies. Take, for instance, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, a decision that sparked significant debate. Many NATO members felt they hadn't been fully consulted, leading to a perception that the U.S. tends to act unilaterally in critical situations, rather than ensuring consensus within a multinational alliance. Is the U.S. perhaps going too far in its leadership role in NATO, forcing the alliance to follow Washington's decisions? Or is this the only way for NATO to respond quickly in an unpredictable world? This is a complex issue, prompting many to question whether NATO is genuinely united or simply a temporary alliance when faced with major challenges? Can the US and NATO truly stand up to rising global powers? As the world witnesses the rapid ascent of powers like China and Russia, NATO is compelled to adjust its strategies. The US, as NATO's leading force, wants the alliance to prioritize potential threats from these two countries, seeing this as a top priority for global security. The issue, however, lies in whether all European NATO members are prepared to pursue the same vision as the US. Not every country sees eye to eye with the US on China or Russia. Some European nations have significant economic ties with China or complex diplomatic relationships with Russia. Therefore, asking them to fully commit to addressing these threats is no easy task. How can NATO ensure it remains united, even when the interests and perspectives of its member nations aren't entirely aligned? So what does the future hold for NATO and America's role within it? This is a crucial question on many minds. As the world rapidly changes, will NATO remain stable, or will it face major transformations to adapt? With NATO's member governments constantly shifting foreign policies and national priorities, the question arises, will the US continue to maintain its strong leadership role, or will it gradually step back to let NATO develop independently? The US has always played a pioneering role, but in an increasingly complex world, relying heavily on a single country could make NATO vulnerable. Can this alliance truly grow independently, setting its own direction without heavy US involvement? And most importantly, can NATO still guarantee the safety of its member states as initially intended? The future of NATO and America's role in it affects not only the member nations but also has significant implications for global security. This journey will be complex, and the world is watching to see which path NATO will take. So, what direction will NATO ultimately choose? Will the organization continue to rely on the US letting it steer and shape its future? Ultimately, is NATO still the global security shield it once was? Viewed as a peacekeeping alliance, NATO is now facing modern challenges like cyber warfare, remote attacks, and pressure from major powers such as Russia and China. We are living in a world full of turbulence where new threats constantly emerge, and major powers continuously seek to assert their influence. NATO's direction will profoundly impact global peace and stability, something that concerns all of us as citizens of the world. Let's watch and discover together, as this journey has only just begun. Who knows what changes we will witness in the future, and whether NATO will continue to be the shield of security the world hopes for. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest developments regarding NATO and the United States. See you in the next video, where we'll explore even more fascinating topics.